Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive into the next episode, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you for supporting this community and for supporting what we're building here. As you know, I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I do it by myself, and I am absolutely loving how many more members that we have currently coming through. It's honestly making my day knowing that this inspiration, that this knowledge, that these resources from all these phenomenal authors that we're interviewing getting out there. So I would love to encourage everyone to continue commenting, letting me know what you're taking from these interviews, what more you would like to know, or who you would like to be interviewed on here. And if you can subscribe, or if you can like, and if you can share, that genuinely means so much to me because it just helps build this community. There's only so much that I can do on my own, and I just appreciate your support so much in getting the word out there. For those who are new to the channel, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Carrington-Russell. I'm an Australian top 25 Amazon best-selling author, and I interview fellow authors who are currently at a peak level in their career. And it's really exciting to hear where they started in their journey, how they got to where they are today. We have discussions around marketing, around their writing process, resources, and deep diving into just their processes and how they've navigated this crazy industry of publishing. So, if that sounds like a little bit of you and you're trying to level up, then definitely subscribe. Watch on. We have over 150 interviews now. So I am sure that there is probably someone within your genre. And even if you are an aspiring author, I feel like there's some great resources for you here. Once again, everyone, thank you so much. Let's jump into the interview. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kai Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of Kick Butt Heroines and Delicious Men in Dark Romantic Worlds, and I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a well-loved author who is known for her romance novels that include those strong female leads and happily ever afters. We are talking to the one and only C.W. Farnsworth. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. And also, I just want to point out, I know I said it before, but you have the cutest sweater on right now, and I'm living for it.
Thank you.
We've just had a recent release. There's a lot happening for you at the moment. It's a bit of a hamster wheel sometimes keeping up with the schedules, especially as you said, you do rapid releases. But I want to dive into all of that shortly. I would love to know your origin story. Why did you start writing, and how did publishing go for the first time?
So I grew up always being a big reader, not always just romance, but mostly fiction. And so had always gravitated towards that as a hobby and had always enjoyed writing as well. I was a poli-sci major in college, which is a pretty writing intensive program. And so I'd always enjoyed writing. Again, I mostly read fiction, mostly wrote nonfiction. And it really was not until after I graduated college that I had the idea for a story and just sat down and started writing it as a hobby. I didn't write it with the intention that a single person beside myself would ever read it or with the intention to publish it. It was purely because I loved writing itself. And so I finished that story and didn't know what to do with it, essentially. I had never talked to an author and didn't know anyone in the publishing industry, didn't know anyone who'd published a book, really didn't know even how to segue into that industry. And also took me a while to work up the courage that I would like this book to go out in the world and for other people to be able to read it. I first finished it, and that was sort of just the personal sense of accomplishment was what I was seeking at first. And so I just kind of set aside that first story and then had another idea and continued writing again, just because I really enjoyed the process and the creative outlet of it. I was working a day job at the time, and it was just something that I looked forward to at the end of the day rather than, reading or watching TV or other pursuits. It was something, I sit all day and have ideas for the story, and then I'd come home and it was exciting to sit down and read it and get it out on the page and sort of have that. And so I finished 2 full books before I really seriously started looking into publishing and how I could get it out in the world. And so self-publishing just felt like the natural avenue for, again, I didn't, the whole query and agenting process just seems totally overwhelming and daunting. And I didn't, to be honest, have the self-confidence that anyone would be interested in representing me or that path would lead anywhere. And so it was really just a sense that I'd written a story that I was proud of and I enjoyed. And so why not see if anyone else enjoys it was really my reasoning for it. And so I self-published my first book. September 2020 was when that one came out. And then I put that in the world, again, not expecting anything to come of it. And some people did read it and reached out to me and said, is there more to this story? And so the first book I released was called 4 Months, 3 Words. And so I wrote a sequel to it called 2 Decisions, One Duty, which is now since been republished as a part 2 in the original book. So 4 Months, 3 Words just exists as one entity, but it was originally split into 2 books. And so I published a sequel for that book, I think in November of 2020. And then as I said before, I'd already started working on what became what's now my second book, but was originally my third book, Kiss Now, Lie Later. And so that book did far exceeded my expectations. I released it on New Year's Eve of 2020, and it was a book that people still to this day, it's being released with a publisher a week from today, which is very exciting. But that was a book that, people still come up to me as one of my most popular. And so I released that and really gained enough confidence and had enough people reach out to me that then I just kept writing and kept releasing. And here I am 4.5 years later.
Did you build that confidence quickly, or is this something that you still navigate with? Because I know imposter syndrome can be quite common as well. So is that something that built over time, or is it something that you still struggle with?
It's both, to be honest. It depends on the day of how I feel. It's funny. You finish a story and it's yours exclusively and entirely. It's yours, and you were the inceptor. It was your idea, your characters, your story. You didn't, I now work with beta readers and editors who provide input before a book comes out, but before anyone else reads it, it's entirely yours. And so there was a while when I would try to hold on to my stories in a sense after they came out and still feel that kind of autonomy or ownership over it. And I've sort of trained myself to let it go as soon as I finish my part in it. And so I think whenever you put any sort of art or creativity out into the world, you're opening it up to hopefully enjoyment and praise, but also criticism and negativity as well. It's impossible to please everyone. You will kill yourself trying to. And so I get my books into the best possible place that I can and make it into the story that I want it to be and I'm happy and proud of. And then, again, I let it go to the extent that I can. And there are days when I see a negative review or I am struggling writing and I'm very down, and I'm definitely my own harshest critic. It takes a lot for me to feel like completely satisfied or proud of something. And so I think there's an element of that too, where I've never read a negative review of my work. That's something I've said to myself already. And so I can let it go in that sense as well of that's a criticism that I've already made of myself and kind of come to terms with.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of that as well. And yeah, I think everyone deals with criticism, and this is definitely a industry where it's very prevalent and unavoidable. And so you just have to sort of come to terms with it in your own way.
Absolutely. And we will discuss this a little bit further down the track. But one thing I do want to comment on, and as you said, we get praise and then we also get criticism more so than ever because we are so accessible, especially through social media in this day and age. And you do profoundly well, especially on Instagram and TikTok. And so that does obviously take down a barrier where pros and cons, trolls can come in as well, and then it can in ways ruin your day. So it's definitely having to build a thicker skin as well. We will talk about that a little bit more with social media. So I want to then still continue talking about this transition period because going from baby author, first release, there's a point where you notice a snowball effect and you think, oh shit, I'm a real author. Like people are wanting something from me. And then you kind of get the opportunity where you can decide whether you want to be full-time author. And everyone thinks this set is super great, and it really is. It's a dream that comes alive. But it's really difficult sometimes to step into that role and create a routine for yourself because you've been so used to working as well as having this as a hobby. So when it becomes a full-time beast, it changes in many ways. How did you go with adapting to that, and how has your process changed to now doing it for a few years?
Yeah, so I switched to full-time last summer, last August. So it's been a full, or no, yes, sorry. Like what year is it? Yeah, I've been doing it for more than a full year. And so I I will say this, it was obviously a dream come true to be able to write full time. I feel very fortunate and grateful that it was even an opportunity, and but it did take me a while to make that leap. I was making more at writing than my full-time job for a while before I made the leap, and it wasn't as much a financial decision. I knew that it was obviously it's scary to make the transition to self-employed because you don't have that sort of job security. But I did know that I was making enough. It was and had been doing so for consistent enough time that it was less scary than it would have been otherwise. It was more so. So as I said, I started out writing as a hobby and as something that I really loved doing. And so my biggest fear with making the transition to it being my full-time career was that I would lose that enjoyment and that really love for it, because it is different to have it be your sole source of income and your job. And it just was, it's a total different perspective, as you said, to sort of make that shift in your mindset. I think for me, it just got to a point where I couldn't keep doing both, and I had to decide either, to back off writing and to, really do a shift in how I'd been structuring my writing schedule and deadlines and all that, or make the leap. And so obviously I made the leap, and I was a massive relief in a lot of ways. I think yeah, as we were talking a little bit before this started, of all the different tasks that are comprised of being an author, particularly an indie author, that extend far beyond writing. That's really, I wish that were the entire gig in some days, but it's really not. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get books out in the world. And so I very quickly found that my goal or my hope when I first started writing full time was, this is going to be incredible. I'm going to have all this time that was previously devoted to my day job that very, very quickly filled up with all the stuff that, I hadn't been sending out my newsletter regularly, social media I offloaded to someone. Like, there were a lot of tasks that I then took on and just filled my schedule right back up. So yeah, I think I had this hope or this dream when I first started writing full time that I would sort of be able to shift my writing hours, which had previously been night times and weekends when I was working full time, into normal working hours. And then I would still have sort of a semblance of a regular schedule. And that really just hasn't happened. It's taken over and extended far beyond. So yeah.
I shouldn't laugh, but I mean, when you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And then
It's a bit of a lived experience.
there's such a there's such a beautiful naivety to it before you do go full time as well. Like, even before you release your first book, you don't know what the expectation is, and there's just there's less pressure. Um, and then when you really do it for a while, you realize it's a business, there's all these moving parts. And I will say, more so than ever, like when I started doing this 10 years ago, which it feels like forever ago, it was a completely different time. There are so many more moving pieces to it now, and there's a lot more independently published authors as well. But one thing that I found really interesting about you is that you do not mind jumping around genres. You have written from mafia to rock star to small town to royalty to sports romance. So I wonder if that was you finding your sort of what you liked, or whether that was more so you don't like whatever you want to write, because there's this opinion that once you do well in a genre, stick to your lane and don't do anything outside that your readers won't follow through. Or there are authors who are like, I don't care, I write what I want to write. I'm one of these authors. So I was yeah, I figured. So that's why I was kind of curious as to whether you were ever a little bit worried about that it wasn't all in complete theme or anything like that. And there's nothing wrong for those who do think that way, but I'm always curious for those who, like to just do their own thing.
Yeah, so there are a few different parts to answer your question. I think one is how I started. I was not doing it full time. I was not doing it with the intention of it becoming a career. I was not doing it to make money. I was writing books, not sure if I would publish it. And so that allowed for a lot of freedom where I would basically just go in whatever direction I felt like. If a story idea struck me and I was excited about it, I would write it and put it out essentially. I also am a fast writer. I liked the challenge of doing something different. It felt sort of stale to me to do four sport romances in a row. I felt like I was going to get burnt out or tired of storylines or recycle or reuse stuff unconsciously. And so I just really liked the idea of a fresh challenge and something totally different than what I had done before. I also think that the authors and the creatives that I admire the most do sort of redefine themselves and do try to do something they haven't done before and sort of take risks. I think that that can lead to some really exciting results. And so I sort of took advantage of different lanes. Part of it was trying to find my niche. I wasn't necessarily, I had read all of different subgenres. There wasn't one that I was necessarily most drawn to or most excited by. And so there was also an element of that of, let me try this out and see what it's like or see how I feel writing it and yeah, I've just always approached my career as it's probably not the smartest from a marketing perspective, as you're saying. I think there are some readers who really love the assurance of an author, and I know I can go to this person and get this.
Yeah.
And I completely understand that perspective of it too, of that sort of surety or certainty of you find an author who does something well, and it's nice to see them do the same thing and see different versions of it and sort of know what you're going to get type of thing. But yeah, for me, it's always been about the challenge and doing something different has it really excited me. I think it's obvious when you read a book if an author really loves that story and is excited about it. And so I've always striven to write stories that I'm really excited about, regardless of whether or not they fit with something I've released before.
You've mentioned a few times now that you're a fast writer,
Mhm.
and you are currently rapid releasing as well, which, as we know, is a technique to quickly build backlog, to remain relevant on the market, build the momentum, and go, go, go. However, caveat, this sometimes, if not almost always, is not a sustainable way unless you are naturally a fast writer as well. So I do want to speak about this briefly because, for example, I'm also a very fast writer as well. And there's so many people who admire, they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could write as quickly as you. And I always say, but you don't, because it's very taxing on the body as well. There's a lot of things that happen quickly. I think, have you ever watched any of Becca Syme's courses or any of her things like that?
I
There's a
haven't, no.
No, that's awesome. So she's incredible. She's definitely a resource that I would recommend for a lot of people. But what she calls fast writers is basically phoenixes. So they write really quickly, they light up a flame, beautiful, and then they burn out very quickly. So when you're naturally programmed like that, it can be really difficult to find the telltale signs of when you are burning out and trying to prevent that as much as possible, but keeping up with the schedule and expectation that you have for yourself. So I would love to know if you've had any obstacles with this at going at such a rapid pace and what you've now implemented to just make sure that you're still really comfortable with that pace and not begrudging the process as well.
Yeah, so I think for the way my writing process works is before I start actually writing a book, I have it very clear in my head. And so I intentionally wait to start working on a book until I have that really clear picture of it. And So like beginning, middle, and major conflicts, characters, backstories, like I have that all. And so I purposefully have sort of trained myself to sit down and to be excited about finally getting it out on the page. Like it's kind of like that anticipation building of like, I make it something to look forward to almost. And so for me, I will sit down and I will get a huge chunk of a book out in the first pass, essentially. And then I will go back and I will fine tune details and I'll do word choice and I'll tune up dialogue and make all those changes. And that process takes me, 6, 8 weeks. But the beginning chunk of like getting the bulk of the actual story out is a very quick process for me. And so I think for whatever reason, that sort of prevents me from getting frustration or writer's block or burnout to a certain extent because I'm excited to get the story out. It's a release and a relief to get it out. And so I'm not I'm not like plodding along chapter by chapter of like, oh, I got to go back and check this detail. Like all the details are fresh in my head. All the what's happened in the past chapter, what's happened in the past 20 chapters is all fresh in my head because I wrote it a few days ago. And so I'm just able to like really power through that first draft and that kind of excitement. And I really enjoy that process. That's my favorite part of the writing process. And so I, once I'm through that phase of it, is then sort of where I take a breath and a reset and I go back with, a few days later with fresh eyes and pull in beta readers. And then it goes to edits and I start getting other outside input in it. But that beginning part of it is really, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, that's when it's really mine. And that has always felt like a special time to me. And so I look forward to that part of the process. And then when it's done, I almost always know what I'm moving to next. And I'm always excited about that as well. It's sort of like, yeah, you finish something and you're done with it. And then you have something else to look forward to. And for whatever reason, that mindset or that methodology has just worked for me. So I always know what I'm moving ahead to, and I always know it really well. And that reasoning or methodology, again, has just worked well for me. And so I've sustained it. I've made changes over time. Obviously, moving to full time changed the time. I was used to having to write books in sort of constricted time frames. Like I'd come home from work and I'd have 6 to 9 or 7 to 10 where I would sit down and write. And I knew, I'm trying to release this book by this deadline. It's due to my editor this deadline. I have to write 5,000 words tonight. And so I'd sit down and write 5,000 words. And I do think sort of not just imagination and creativity, but writing is sort of a muscle. And the more you exercise it and train it, the better it gets. And so, that's not to say there aren't days where I sit down and I don't know what to write. I'm not not trying to like glamorize it by any extent. I have tough days. I have days when I don't want to write. But for the most part, I make it something that I look forward to, and I try to hang on to my roots of loving writing as much as I can and really look forward and love that process as much as possible. And so I think that is sort of the main reason why I've been able to keep up the schedule I have.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Like, it's so nice when, like, I can tell how passionate you still are about it. And that is such a beautiful and special thing, to be honest, because sometimes it really can weigh authors down when it does become full time. And then I feel like sometimes there's this narrative of like, oh, I have to do my work. And I think it's one of the most saddening things about the process because when you think about when we first started, when we are so happy and we're so excited, we were trying to find every moment we could get to write it. And I love that you still have that. Like it's such a beautiful thing to still have. So I really admire that. I would love to know more about the recent release. So from now on is your third book, I believe, in the whole hockey series. So did you have um, any unforeseen obstacles, or it was a slightly different process, or anything special about these characters that took you by surprise?
So this was my first last book in a series. I've always left avenues open for side characters or for second generation or sort of other storylines. This was the first time I sat down and wrote a book knowing it would be the last book in the series. And so that was a challenge where there are two prior books that had sort of other storylines that intersect with each other and in this books. And so I really wanted it to be a full circle and closure of not just this book, but the series itself. And so that was a somewhat unique challenge. But then the upside was that I knew this world and these characters really well. That Hunter and Eve, the two main characters, and From Now On both appear in the previous two books. And so I'd already built up or teased at their backstory or personality. And I also knew the side characters in this book super well because they'd all appeared in the first two books. And so I think the biggest challenge was ending the series and making, tying up all the loose ends from other storylines and from the other books. But then it was really easy to get into the mindset of this world and these characters. And so that part of it was really, really fun and easy for me to dive back into this world. So I think those were the two things that sort of stood out to me as being unique for this book. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to write and very bitter. Well, I just finished the book after this, so I'm like a little bit removed from this world now, but it was very bittersweet when I finished From Now On of that kind of final saying goodbye. Most of my books are standalones. And so I'm much more accustomed to just ending one couple's trajectory versus three's. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm going to take us out of the fun for a moment, unless you tell me that you absolutely also have fun with social media, and then I will just immediately close this interview and be like, you can't be this perfect, Charlotte. But social media is such a tricky beast in itself, social media marketing. And one thing that I noticed is that you do, like, your branding is so on point. When I went through your Instagram, I was like, I want to be Charlotte when I grow up because it just looks so beautiful, so unified. And the same with your TikTok. You do really well with TikTok. You understand sort of the hooks, the grabs, the content that really makes a reader want to keep, reading more. So I was wondering if you had any advice for those who are watching when it comes to social media and, creating the right amount of something that's just going to hook the reader enough and hopefully keep them wanting more.
Yeah, well, thank you first off. You're very sweet to say that. It was a lot of trial and error, to be honest. So my branding, I hired someone to do my branding and my website and everything, and she did a bunch of templates for me. And so I basically just repurpose and recycle those for different books is how I approach Instagram. I feel like there's a little bit less strategy with Instagram. I mostly just try to pump information out there. I'll, occasionally do stuff about my backlist, but it's mostly stuff about front list and new releases and new audiobooks and signings and anything that's sort of coming up. And it's like a way to stay updated with me aside from my newsletter. TikTok is where I have a long backlist. And so I have a lot to draw on. I feel like I would have a much harder time with TikTok if I only had one or two books out because there are certain scenes or lines that I've pulled out that work and I know work. And so I repurpose and recycle those in many different ways. But not only can I do that with one book, I can do that with 24. And so it's, for me, it was trial and error to sort of figure out what worked. I would look at what other authors are posting. I would do searches of billionaire romance books and sports romance books and sort out what got the most likes and find trending sounds from that and see what people were using as hooks and what sort of, lines would work. And then I went through all my books and I pulled out scenes from each book that I thought would work and would grab attention and had some sort of hook to them. And so I have like a massive Word document from those that I will just go and pull scenes from and then just, keep posting. I posted like 10 times a day for several weeks and that like skyrocketed my views. And it's a lot of time and research and it's constantly changing. The algorithm is always changing. And so I've just tried to put as much out there and seen what's worked and what hasn't worked and try to learn from it. But I've also posted the exact same video at the exact same time, like 2 different weeks, and had one get 100,000 views and one get 10,000. Like it's just, there are some factors to it that I feel like you can't figure out and just kind of have to let go. But I've tried to learn from what's worked for me and what I've seen work for other people and apply that to the best of my ability. But I by no means claim to be an expert on any of it.
100%. And I think, like always, with because I think there's such an admiration for authors when they do super well with TikTok, and there's this maybe not so much anymore, but the last couple of years, everyone thought if you make it on TikTok, it makes breaks in careers, and I do agree with that to a certain extent as well. However, I do also believe that there is an element of luck as well on there, and I think that a lot of authors don't necessarily believe that they think that there's a blueprint, and it's not always the same. It's the same with, in again, this is in my opinion, but with releases, everyone's like, if you've done fantastic once, it's going to continuously happen. This is the blueprint, this is going to happen. And again, I say there is an element of luck and timing as well. Would you agree with that? Have you found that you've had a similar experience with that, with some things being hits and some things being misses, and how can you pivot? And this has been out of my control.
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. There's an element of luck to it. I think there's only so much you can control with it, right? You can it's the same with releasing a book. You can put it out there, but you have no sway over what the reception is, if readers will like it, if readers will read it. There's a lot you can do to get it in front of as many readers as possible. And the more readers who see it, the more readers who will potentially like it and talk about it and tell people. And so I think, yeah, I think it's two-tone. I think there's a lot you can do to sort of do as much as you can to get it out there and to do your part to try to ensure it succeeds. And then there's this gray area that's how other people receive it, whether other people talk about it, how the algorithm promotes it, who it gets pushed actually in front of, that, yeah, you have no control over. And so there's always things you can control and things you can't with anything, right? And so I think social media is no different.
What are the three top things that you always have in place when you have a release that has to be set in place right before release day? What are the things you're preparing for?
Like immediately leading up to release or farther
Well,
in
just the
advance,
three
like
things.
arcs and everything?
Yeah, like whether it's more so the marketing aspect, so arcs could definitely be one, arcs, newsletters, the things that you're like, we definitely have to make sure that this is happening for it to potentially be the greatest success that it can be.
Yeah, I think arcs are huge. I've put a larger emphasis on that more recently. And yeah, just the sooner you get the book in front of people, the sooner they'll start talking about it. And the more, like, if your momentum starts building on release day, you're sort of already behind the curve. You really need that wave to start like 2-3 weeks ahead of time. So that's, I think, key. And sort of in a similar vein, I've started doing teasers on TikTok and other platforms farther in advance from release than I used to, again, because I feel like there's no downside to getting people excited about the release as soon as possible. So as soon as, you don't want to do it too far in advance, because then people are like, well, this doesn't come out for 6 months. Like, I don't care about this right now. But if you do it in a reasonable time frame, like 2-3 weeks ahead of time, and like start getting people excited, like it's coming, sort of build that anticipation, I think that's key. So you can do that with arcs. You can do that with social media posts. I found newsletter swaps with other authors to be really helpful and great. So if you are friendly with other authors, or there are certain authors who write in a similar lane, or particularly for the release. So like if it's a sports romance release, I'll reach out to all the authors I'm friendly with who also write sports romance and ask if they'd be willing to put it in their newsletter. And that is just sort of a straight pipeline to other readers who may not subscribe to your newsletter and know about your release, but who enjoy that type of book and are looking for that type of book. Is a really great networking strategy. I feel like I do a fair amount of like Instagram lives and promo stuff ahead of a release. I think that can be really useful. And I've also started doing in-store signings around releases, which is also just kind of a different way to directly reach out to readers versus asking them to do the work and find your book. Like, you're just basically trying to make it as easy as possible for them and trying to reach them in a myriad of ways. It's, easier to, or not easier, but if you're in a bookstore face to face with an author, you're much more likely to pick up the book than you are if you're scrolling on TikTok and happen to go past a, snippet of their story. So if you can sort of go to the places where romance readers are and promote your book, then you're much more likely to find a receptive audience. So
one thing that I love about this advice too is like it can be budget friendly but costly time wise. And what I mean by that is like, say for example, when we're talking about arcs, you use Valentine PR, which is absolutely awesome, stunning, love them. But for those who are just starting up, and I imagine you would have very much had to do the same, I know I did as well, is that if you don't necessarily have the money to outsource it, then you can build your own ARC team. You can ask readers, create a Google form or whatever it may be, and then just filter through who you trust to have an advanced copy and just say, hey, if I give you this copy, please like write a review. You can approach people. All you can do is ask. And if somebody says no, but maybe somebody will say yes. The same with TikTok. Yes, you will have to spend a lot more time with the marketing, with the lives and things like that. But if you don't yet have the budget, then you will have to afford time to try and get yourself out there as well. So there's heaps of great ideas in this that you can sort of mix and match as well. Would love to know what you have actually found to be so far in your career, your greatest achievement and your greatest challenge.
sort of, I don't know if I've had my greatest achievement yet. I think I am never, or I've never felt like I've been entirely satisfied, and I don't ever want to feel that way, if that makes any sense. There have been so many amazing milestones that I've hit and never expected to. I've got 4 books coming out this year that'll be in bookstores. I've, hit the top 50 on many of my releases, and I've, there have been financial milestones and things that I've been able to afford in my life that I wouldn't have been able to without this career. And so, I think there are so many things, but also I always try to be forward looking and not as reliant on the past and what's happened. And I think the day that I'm entirely like happy with a book and think it's the best thing that's ever been put out in the world is the day that I need to stop writing. And yeah, it's just a part of the career that I feel like I always want to be striving towards something else and to have a new goal in mind and always be trying to be a better writer and a better marketer and become more successful at all these different things. And so there are so many things I can say I've achieved, but I don't know if one I can say is the greatest. Maybe when I do stop writing and look back on the entirety of my career, I'll have a better answer to that. But I very much hope and think that the best is still ahead, and that's what I'm headed toward. I think I don't know if I have worst either. I think there have been very hard days. There have been days I've considered stopping writing, but I've never, looking back on where I started, there's so many things that I would have done differently, but I also recognize that I did the best that I could at the time. There were so many aspects of this industry that you really have to experience firsthand to know how to navigate, or even if you do seek advice from others, no author's journey is the same, no situation is the same. And so you sort of have to navigate it to the best of your ability at the time. And looking back, there are so many things that I would have done differently when it comes to writing and marketing, but also I'm so thrilled and fortunate to be where I am. And so who knows, if I'd done something differently, I would have ended up in a different place, but would it have been a better place? I like play that game as well. So I don't know if those are great answers to either question, but I feel like, yeah, I'm looking forward to what's ahead, and there's nothing looking back that I would have done differently at the time, knowing what I did, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. This is then one of my favorite questions to ask, and beautifully comes off that as well. What is the big dream that you're chasing? Like, what is just something that you're like, that is this is the big goal that I want right now. And honestly, the bigger the better, because that's what we're here for. So what is it that you're chasing right now?
I think this has changed as I've written and as I've set goals for myself that I've achieved. I think I always want to have something ahead that I haven't hit yet. And some of those goals are, numbers of books I've sold or how much they've made and rankings and all of that sort of stuff. But I think largely I just want to have created stories and books that resonate with people and that help people and that bring people entertainment and enjoyment. And I think reading is such an incredible escape. As I said, I started out as an avid reader myself. I've always been drawn toward reading and think it's just, it's so awe-inspiring to think about the worlds that people create and just come out of people's imaginations. It's really sort of astonishing what creativity and imagination can lead to. And so knowing some of the authors that I look up to and gave me that feeling, it's just astonishing to think that someone else might feel that way about my own books. And so I hope that that's a feeling I've given people and is, again, I write the books because I enjoy writing them, but I'm also hoping that people will enjoy reading them, obviously. And so as just knowing that I've given that feeling to people, I think will always be looking back on my career, what I'm hoping to achieve ultimately.
I have speed dating with an author. So basically, what it is 5 rapid questions. But I've lit a candle, I've created ambience, we even have flowers. But are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Question number one. Who is your favorite author? Who is an author that really inspires you and why?
There are so many. I could not easily narrow it down to one. I will say Louisa May Alcott's Little Woman was one of my absolute favorite books growing up. It's still a favorite to this day. So I'm going to say her, but there are so many. I think, again, just there's so many incredible, amazing books in the world. The fact that I'll never get to read all of them is a disappointment of life. But yeah, there are so many.
We can only try to read as many as we can. That is the goal for
Exactly.
life.
I can only try, but yeah.
What are the 3 words that best describe you?
Hmm. Um, I'm going to say creative. Um, see, if you asked me this about one of my characters, it would be a lot easier. About myself is difficult. I hope considerate, and I'm trying to think of a better form of this word. I'm like trying to say like not aspirational, but like the sense that you're like seeking something. I can't think of the exact right. Aspirational is not what I'm trying to think of, but it's
Like aspiring
adjacent.
towards?
Maybe like, but you're constantly seeking out something. Do you know what I mean? Like, or constantly looking for something, or
Dreamer?
I don't know. I'll probably think of it at 3 a.m. tonight. I'll wake up and I'll be like, that's the exact word I was trying to think of.
But then maybe this question will be slightly easier. Who has been your favorite character to write and why? Since you said you probably know like the characteristics of your character, who's been your favorite?
Yes, yes. Gosh, this answer changes depending on the day and who's freshest in my mind because I've written a lot and they're all special to me in different ways and unconsciously me in different ways. I think Lennon from Left Field Love she was a very special character to write and one who stuck with me.
Amazing.
Final
What
answer.
is the best song that describes you?
This is another good question.
Or is there a particular
Um,
band or artist that you really resonate with their music?
well, I listen to a lot of Taylor Swift while writing, or like Mumford. I'm trying to think of song names. I'll say "This Is Me Trying" by Taylor Swift.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
Calligraphy.
Oh,
I love writing in calligraphy.
that is cool. Do you
Yeah.
have like the I always love, I can never remember what they're called, with like the stamps and stuff like that. Do you have those too? The and
I have like the fancy pens with the metal end with the like capsules,
Yeah.
the ink capsules that you put in. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I was thinking of is it the emblem that you like? When I think of calligraphy, I think of the letter, like the beautiful letter, and then it's like sealed shut in like a Harry Potter way. But I
Oh,
can,
oh, are you talking about the wax, like the
yes,
wax
yes,
seal?
that's what.
Okay, okay. I do. Well, I think someone did give me one of those at some point. So I might have one laying around, but I've never used that to be honest. And I do like the calligraphy for place cards, the holidays. I don't use it as much as I should, but there was a while when I got super, like I had books that I would like, you can follow along, like similar to how kids learn cursive, you can do like each different letter and do out. And yeah, I feel like penmanship is just sort of a lost art form these days, which is maybe sacrilegious to say as an author who types all the time, but I feel like good penmanship is just it's a fun skill to have.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of have expectation now when we are at the same signing, we finally get to meet in person. I will be so disheartened if I don't get a handwritten letter with a wax stamp on it. Like the expectation is real.
Yeah. Well, don't look at my signing signature. I started out writing out C.W. Farnsworth when I first, and then that rapidly became untenable for my wrists. So now I just do like a little CWF scribble is my signing signature. But yes, I'll work on a letter for you.
I love it. I actually feel like we need to talk about signatures more too, because I started writing when I was 15. I always knew I wanted to be an author. But when you have
Mhm.
the name Kaya Carrington-Russell, that signature is so like unattainable every time. And so it started off with Kaya, but now I'm pretty sure it's just a K with like what might be a marking. So if anyone sees inconsistent signatures, let me assure you it's still from me. Um, I have had so much fun today. Let us know what we need to be on the lookout for next. And most importantly, where do we find you?
Yeah, so I have a busy year coming up. So starting off, I have my first release that's coming out traditionally is coming out a week from today, actually March 4th. And then so that's coming out. It's a book that's been out with the bookstores with a new cover, and I wrote a bonus chapter for it as well. So the content isn't exactly identical to the current version that's out. And then end of April, April 29th, First Flight Final Fall comes out, which is a college soccer romance. I should backtrack and say Kiss Now Lie Later is like an enemies to lovers, high school romance. It's like a sort of a modern day Romeo and Juliet vibe to it. And then in June is my the fourth book in my Billionaire Kensington series is coming out. That's called Anti-Hero. And that's coming out June 24th. I haven't announced any tropes or details for that yet, so stay tuned. And then August 5th is when For Now, Not Forever comes out. So that's a companion book to Kiss Now, Lie Later. That's set in the same world with the same characters. And then October 28th is when All the Wrong Plays comes out. And that is that's set in the same world as First Flight Final Fall. So it's the same, it's set in Germany. So the same fictional soccer team. And that's like a teammate's sister. And she's the photographer for the team, and it's a little bit of like a forbidden love. And then past that, I have not made any announcements yet, so stay tuned for that as well. And best ways to find me, my website is authorwfarnsworth.com, so you can find information about all my books on there. Sign up for my newsletter, and then I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. My handle is at CW Farnsworth, so you can find me all those places as well.
Amazing. You do have a hell of a year coming up.
I
But we're
do.
excited. We're excited to be a part of the journey. And yeah, we'll keep following and grow with you. That's the plan. That's the aim of the game.
Exactly.
It's been so much fun, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for having me.